The rain always sounded louder when I was completely alone. That was the first thought in my head when I stepped out of the Blue Canary Jazz Lounge at 2:13 in the morning with my violin case pressed against my chest and freezing rain soaking through my coat. Manhattan looked different after midnight. Colder. Less human. The streets glittered beneath yellow taxi lights and blurred reflections from expensive storefronts that had already locked their doors hours ago. My feet ached from 11 straight hours carrying trays through crowded tables while drunk businessmen snapped their fingers at me like I was part of the furniture. The smell of whiskey and cigar smoke still clung to my hair. Somewhere behind me, muffled jazz piano drifted through the lounge walls before the heavy doors shut completely. Silence rushed back in. I adjusted the strap on my violin case and pulled my coat tighter around myself. The case was older than I was. Black leather cracked at the edges. One broken latch held together with silver tape. My mother used to say it made me look like a girl carrying around broken dreams. Maybe she was right. Rainwater slipped down the back of my neck as I hurried toward the subway entrance 3 blocks away. My paycheck wouldn't clear until Friday, which meant I had exactly $18 in my checking account and no money for a cab. Again, the wind picked up hard enough to sting my face. I lowered my head and kept walking past closed flower shops and dark office buildings where nobody noticed people like me anymore. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow at first, then faster. My grip tightened around the violin case automatically. Don't panic, Celeste. Don't turn around too quickly. Don't let them know you're scared. Every woman in New York learns those rules eventually. I crossed the street when the light changed. The footsteps crossed too. My stomach dropped. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I was tired and paranoid and letting another 12-hour shift mess with my head. Then a voice called out behind me. Hey, sweetheart. My blood went cold instantly. I kept walking. Faster now. Rain hammered against the sidewalk hard enough to blur the city into streaks of gold and black. Another voice laughed somewhere behind me. Older. Rougher. She's not even gonna say hello? My pulse started pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The subway entrance was still half a block away. Too far. Way too far. I made the mistake of glancing behind me. 2 men. Dark jackets. One smoking. Both watching me with the kind of smile that makes your instincts scream before your brain catches up. I turned forward again immediately. My breathing became shallow. Controlled. Quick. Don't run. Running makes them chase you. My mother taught me that when I was 16 after a man followed me home from violin practice in Queens. Keep walking, she'd whispered afterward while locking every door in our apartment. Fear excites dangerous men. The footsteps got closer. One of them whistled softly behind me. A black SUV rolled slowly past the curb ahead before disappearing around the corner. Expensive. Tinted windows. The kind of vehicle rich men used when they wanted privacy. I barely noticed it at first. My attention stayed locked on the reflections moving behind me in the rain-covered glass windows. Then one of the men grabbed my elbow. Hard enough to stop me cold. Relax, he said with a grin. We just want to talk. And that was the exact moment another car appeared beside us like something out of a nightmare. A black Rolls-Royce stopped inches from the curb. The back window lowered slowly. I couldn't see the man inside clearly at first. Only sharp shadows, dark eyes, and the glowing end of a cigarette between elegant fingers. Then his voice cut through the rain. Calm, deep, deadly quiet. Take your hands off her before this becomes your worst mistake. The man holding my arm released me so fast it almost threw me off balance. The cigarette between the stranger's fingers glowed softly inside the dark Rolls-Royce, while rain streamed across the tinted window like silver lines. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. The taller man beside me forced out a nervous laugh. Hey, relax. We were just talking. The stranger inside the car tilted his head slightly. Expensive black wool. Sharp jawline. Eyes colder than the weather outside. Do I look interested in your explanation? He asked quietly. His voice never rose. That somehow made it worse. The smoker swallowed hard beside me. I felt it happen before I understood it. The shift in the air. The fear. Both men stepped backward immediately like animals sensing something dangerous in the dark. One muttered a curse under his breath. Then they disappeared into the rain without another word. Just like that. Gone. I stood frozen on the sidewalk with water dripping from my hair and my violin case still clutched against my chest hard enough to hurt. The Rolls-Royce remained beside me silently. engine running smooth and low. The back door opened from the inside. Warm amber light spilled onto the wet pavement. "Get in," the man said. Every instinct I had screamed no. Rich strangers in black cars at 2 in the morning did not equal safety. Especially not in Manhattan. Especially not men who could scare grown adults without even stepping outside. "I am fine," I lied quickly. "Thank you for helping." His eyes moved over me slowly. Not inappropriate. Not flirtatious. Worse. Observant. Like he was memorizing details. The trembling fingers around my violin case. The soaked coat. The exhaustion under my eyes. "You are shaking," he said. I hated that he noticed. "It is 38 degrees outside," I replied. Most people would be shaking. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not a smile exactly. More like amusement he rarely allowed himself to feel. A car horn echoed somewhere down the avenue. Rain hammered harder against the roof of the Rolls-Royce. The city suddenly felt too empty around us. Too quiet. "The subway closed 20 minutes ago because of flooding downtown," he said calmly. "And another storm warning hits in less than 10 minutes. I blinked. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things." Something about the answer tightened my stomach. A man stepped out of the front passenger seat, holding a black umbrella. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark coat tailored perfectly despite the weather. Security. Definitely security. He opened the umbrella above the rear door without speaking once. "Miss Rowan," the man inside the car said softly. My pulse stopped for half a second. "How do you know my name?" The stranger finally leaned forward enough for the city lights to touch his face completely. Dark hair brushed neatly away from his forehead. Sharp cheekbones. Expensive watch glinting beneath his sleeve. Beautiful in the kind of way that made people nervous instead of comfortable. "You play violin at the Blue Canary every Thursday night," he said. "You take your break exactly at 11:15 and stand near the kitchen exit because the alley is quieter there." Cold spread through my chest. "Have you been watching me?" The question came out smaller than I intended. He held my gaze steadily. "No," he said. "But people notice beautiful things, Celeste." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Nobody had called me beautiful in a very long time. Not sincerely. Not without wanting something afterward. The bodyguard still stood silently beside the open door while rainwater streamed off the umbrella edges. I should have walked away. Any smart woman would have. But the sidewalk behind me suddenly felt darker than the stranger waiting inside the car. "You always get into cars with strange men?" I asked carefully. His expression remained unreadable. "Only when they are trying to keep someone alive." Lightning flashed somewhere above the skyline. For one brief second, I saw exhaustion behind his eyes. Real exhaustion. The kind that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. It caught me off guard more than the expensive suit or dangerous calm ever could. I looked back toward the empty street where those men had disappeared moments earlier. Then toward the warm light inside the Rolls-Royce. My fingers tightened around the violin case one last time before I stepped inside. The door closed softly behind me. And somehow that sound felt less like entering a car and more like crossing a line I could never uncross. The inside of the Rolls-Royce smelled like cedarwood, leather, and rain carried in from the storm outside. Warm air brushed against my frozen hands as the city lights slid across the tinted windows in streaks of gold and silver. Nobody spoke at first. The silence felt deliberate, heavy. The man beside me sat perfectly still with one hand resting against his knee while the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. Not because of his size, because of how controlled he seemed. Every movement looked measured, precise, like nothing around him happened by accident. I kept my violin case on my lap like some kind of shield. "You know my name," I said carefully, "but I do not know yours." His gaze shifted toward me slowly. Lucien Valenti. The name hit something in my memory immediately. Not fully, just enough to make my stomach tighten again. I had heard it before somewhere. Maybe whispered by customers inside the lounge. Maybe mentioned in one of those stories New Yorkers traded quietly after midnight. Men with money. Men with power. Men nobody challenged twice. "Valenti," I repeated softly. "As in Valenti Hotels?" "Among other things." The answer told me absolutely nothing. Rain streaked down the windows while Manhattan blurred past outside. Empty sidewalks. Neon signs reflecting across flooded streets. A cyclist rushing through the storm with his hood pulled low. Normal city life continuing while I sat beside a stranger who made the entire atmosphere inside the car feel dangerous. You should not have gotten into this car, I admitted before I could stop myself. Lucien looked almost amused again. And yet you did. Because I had 2 men following me. 3. I blinked. What? There were 3 men, he said calmly. The third stayed across the street, near the liquor store window. A cold shiver slid down my spine. I had not even seen him. Lucien noticed my expression immediately. That is why you do not walk alone after 2 in the morning, he said quietly. Irritation flared inside me before fear could settle completely. I work double shifts because rent in Manhattan costs more than oxygen, I snapped. Some of us do not have private drivers waiting outside jazz clubs. The bodyguard in the front passenger seat glanced toward me briefly through the mirror. Lucien did not react at all. What do you make at the Blue Canary? He asked. The question caught me off guard. What? Per week? Why? Humor me. I hesitated. Around $600 with tips. Lucien stared out the window thoughtfully. You play violin professionally too? I laughed once under my breath. Bitter. Exhausted. Not exactly. But you were trained. It was not a question. I looked down at the worn violin case on my lap. Juilliard Prep Division, I admitted quietly. Years ago. Lucien turned toward me fully for the first time since I entered the car. Something sharpened behind his eyes. Interest maybe. Real interest. What happened? Funny how 4 simple words could hurt more than insults sometimes. I swallowed slowly before answering. Life happened. The city lights flickered across his face while silence settled again between us. Softer this time. Less threatening. My eyes drifted toward his hands resting near the silver lighter beside him. Long fingers. Clean knuckles. A thin scar near his wrist disappearing beneath his sleeve. Not flashy. Not accidental either. This was a man who lived around danger comfortably. Those men tonight, I said carefully. Did you know them? No, then why stop? Lucien looked at me for several seconds before answering. Because men who corner women in dark streets deserve to be reminded they are not untouchable. His voice stayed calm, controlled, but something colder moved underneath the words. I looked away first. The Rolls-Royce slowed near a red light downtown. A group of college students hurried across the intersection laughing beneath umbrellas while steam rose from subway grates nearby. The normalcy felt surreal compared to the strange tension surrounding the man beside me. Then his phone vibrated once against the leather seat. The bodyguard answered it immediately through an earpiece. His expression changed almost instantly. Subtle. Tight. Sir, he said quietly. We may have a situation at the lounge. Lucien's eyes darkened slightly. What kind of situation? The bodyguard paused. Someone is asking questions about the violin player. The inside of the car suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Slowly, Lucien turned toward me again. And for the first time all night, I saw a genuine concern break through his perfect composure. Celeste, he said quietly, tell me exactly who knew you were leaving work alone tonight. My mouth went dry the second Lucien asked the question. The rain outside suddenly sounded louder against the windows. Sharper, like the city itself was listening. Nobody knew. I answered too quickly. Lucien kept watching me. Calm. Patient. Dangerous men probably learn patience early. Think carefully, he said quietly. People rarely follow women through Midtown by coincidence. I stared down at my violin case while my thoughts raced backward through the night. The Blue Canary. The crowded tables. The drunk finance guys requesting old Sinatra songs. The bartender arguing over inventory near midnight. Then something clicked uncomfortably inside my chest. There was a customer, I admitted slowly. He stayed almost my entire shift. Lucien's expression never changed. Somehow that made me more nervous. Describe him. Late 40s maybe. Expensive coat. Silver watch. He kept asking questions about me. The bodyguard in front glanced toward Lucien again through the mirror. Silent communication passed between them instantly. What kind of questions? Lucien asked. If I always work Thursdays. If I lived nearby. If I played violin professionally. Saying it out loud made the whole thing sound worse somehow. More real. Lucien leaned back slightly against the leather seat. And your manager allowed this? I laughed once under my breath. Tired. Bitter. My manager would sell my kidney for better customer reviews. A faint shadow of irritation crossed Lucien's face before disappearing again. Did this man touch you? The question came sharp enough to surprise me. No, his jaw relaxed slightly. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. The Rolls-Royce turned onto Park Avenue while the storm blurred luxury hotels into glowing shapes behind rain-covered glass. Everything outside looked distant now. Unreal. Why do you care so much? I asked quietly. Lucien looked out the window instead of answering immediately. Because people who ask the wrong questions at the wrong time tend to create problems. That sounds like a threat. It is advice. His tone stayed perfectly calm. I should have been terrified. Honestly, part of me still was. But another part kept noticing impossible details instead. The way he never interrupted me. The way he listened fully before speaking. The fact that despite all the obvious power surrounding him, he had not touched me once. Not even accidentally. Men with money usually touch too much. Too casually. Like the world belonged to them. Lucien felt different. Controlled in a way that almost looked painful. His phone vibrated again softly. This time he answered himself. Talk. Silence filled the car while someone spoke on the other end. Lucien's eyes darkened gradually with every passing second. No police involvement, he said finally. Handle it quietly. My stomach tightened immediately. Quietly. That word carried weight around men like him. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his coat pocket. What happened? I asked before I could stop myself. Someone searched your employee locker after you left tonight. Every muscle in my body locked instantly. What? Nothing appears stolen. His gaze moved toward me carefully. But they were looking for something specific. I tried remembering what was even inside my locker. Lip balm. Cheap perfume. Sheet music folded inside my backpack. Receipts. Aspirin. Completely normal things. I do not understand, I whispered. Why would anyone care about me? Lucien studied me for several seconds with an expression I could not fully read. That, he said softly, is becoming the interesting question. The city lights flashed across his face again. For the first time since entering the car, I noticed exhaustion around his eyes. Not physical exhaustion. Something older. He carried it quietly. Elegantly. Like people carried scars beneath expensive clothing. You still have not told me where we are going, I said carefully. Home. My home. Unless you would prefer standing alone in another rainstorm while strangers search your workplace. Sarcasm should have annoyed me. Instead, I almost smiled. Almost. The realization unsettled me more than anything else tonight. Outside, lightning flashed across the skyline again. The storm had grown worse while we talked. Streets flooded near the curbs. Umbrellas bent sideways beneath heavy wind. Lucien loosened his tie slightly for the first time all night. Such a small movement should not have mattered. But somehow it made him look more human. More dangerous, too. You always rescue random women from sidewalks? I asked softly. No, then why me? He looked directly at me this time. No hesitation. No games. Just those cold, dark eyes holding mine steadily inside the dim car. Because, he said quietly, the moment I saw fear on your face tonight, I knew somebody had already failed you long before I arrived. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Before I could answer, the Rolls-Royce slowed in front of my apartment building in Queens. Then both Lucien and the bodyguard went completely still at the exact same moment. I followed their gaze through the rain-covered windshield. A black sedan sat across the street with its headlights off, and someone inside was watching my apartment. The black sedan across the street sat perfectly still beneath the rain like it had been waiting for us all night. No headlights. No movement. Just dark windows reflecting the storm back at us. My apartment building suddenly looked different. Smaller. Exposed. Unsafe in ways I had never noticed before. Lucien's bodyguard touched his earpiece once. Same vehicle from Midtown, he said quietly. My stomach dropped instantly. You mean they followed us? Lucien kept his eyes on the sedan. No, he answered softly. I think they arrived before we did. Fear spread slowly through my chest like cold water. My tiny apartment on the 4th floor suddenly felt impossibly far away. I just want to go home, I whispered. Lucien finally turned toward me. That is exactly what worries me. Rain rolled down the windshield while silence settled heavily inside the car again. Somewhere nearby, thunder echoed over Queens. I stared at my apartment building entrance. Old brick. Flickering security light. Rusted mailbox panel near the front door that management never fixed. Nothing about it looked important enough for strangers to watch. Maybe they are waiting for someone else, I said quietly, mostly trying to convince myself. Lucien studied the sedan carefully. Maybe, but his expression told me he did not believe that for 1 second. The bodyguard opened his door slightly before pausing. Sir. Lucien gave a small nod. The bodyguard stepped into the rain without hesitation, black umbrella opening instantly above him. He crossed the street calmly toward the parked sedan, while water splashed beneath polished shoes. What is he doing? I asked nervously. Finding out whether your neighbors have terrible taste in parking spots, Lucien replied. I almost laughed despite myself. Almost. We watched through rain-streaked windows as the bodyguard approached the sedan slowly. Then the car engine suddenly started. My pulse jumped hard enough to hurt. The sedan pulled away from the curb immediately and disappeared down the flooded street without stopping once. The bodyguard remained standing in the rain, watching it vanish before calmly returning toward us. They ran, I whispered. Lucien's jaw tightened slightly. Yes. The bodyguard slid back into the passenger seat. Plates were fake, he said quietly. Driver kept his face covered. Lucien nodded once. Come again. Controlled again. Like this kind of thing happened every Tuesday night. You are not staying here tonight, he said. The words hit me instantly. Absolutely not. Celeste, I do not even know you. That has not stopped dangerous people from learning about you apparently. Irritation flared hotter than fear this time. Maybe because I was exhausted. Maybe because the entire night felt unreal already. You cannot decide where I sleep, I snapped. You are not my father. Lucien looked completely unbothered by my anger. No, he said softly. But unlike your father, I am currently trying to keep strangers from watching your apartment. The words landed harder than he probably realized. I looked away immediately. My father had walked out when I was 12 with a suitcase and promises he never intended to keep. Men leaving had become normal after that. Men protecting me never had. Lucien noticed the change in my expression instantly. Of course he did. Men like him noticed everything. That was not meant cruelly, he said quietly after a moment. Most truths are, I replied. Another silence settled between us. Softer this time. Outside, rainwater rushed down the gutters while the city glowed silver beneath the storm. My apartment window on the 4th floor stayed dark. Empty. Lonely. If I leave with you, I asked carefully, what exactly happens next? Lucien folded his hands together loosely. You sleep somewhere secure tonight. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we figure out why people suddenly care about a violin player from Queens. His calm confidence should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me a little. Powerful men always sounded calm before making decisions for everyone else. You make everything sound simple, I whispered. No, Lucien said quietly. I make difficult things sound survivable. My chest tightened unexpectedly again. I hated how his voice affected me. Steady. Controlled. Safe in a way I could not explain logically. The bodyguard glanced back toward us slightly. Sir, we should move. Lucien nodded once before looking at me again. You have two options tonight, Celeste. I hate when rich men say things like that. That faint, almost smile appeared again near the corner of his mouth. Brief. Dangerous. Human. You can walk upstairs alone hoping those men were only curious, he said softly. Or you can trust me long enough to survive until morning. Thunder cracked across the skyline hard enough to shake the windows slightly. I stared at my apartment one last time before finally whispering the words I never imagined saying to a stranger. Where are you taking me? Lucien held my gaze steadily while the Rolls-Royce engine hummed beneath us like distant thunder. Home, he said quietly. Mine this time. The drive into Manhattan felt unreal after that. Rain covered the windows and silver rivers while the city stretched around us, glowing gold beneath the storm. I sat quietly beside Lucien with my violin case still resting against my chest like armor. Nobody spoke for several minutes. The bodyguard focused on the road while soft classical music played somewhere through hidden speakers inside the Rolls-Royce. Bach. Of course it was Bach. Lucien noticed me listening. You know the piece. Violin Partita No. 2. I answered automatically. Most people do not recognize it that quickly. Most people did not spend half their childhood practicing 6 hours a day. His gaze lingered on me briefly before turning back toward the rain outside. You miss it. It was not a question. I looked down at my hands. Fingertips rough from years of strings and cheap restaurant trays. Missing something does not mean you get it back. Lucien did not answer immediately. The silence between us no longer felt threatening now, just heavy with things neither of us fully understood yet. The Rolls-Royce finally slowed beneath a massive black iron gate overlooking the river. Security cameras turned slowly above stone walls covered in rainwater and ivy. The gates opened automatically without the driver stopping once. My stomach tightened instantly. You live here. The estate beyond the gates looked less like a home and more like something hidden from the rest of the world on purpose. Dark stone, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing warm against the storm. Expensive cars lined beneath a covered entrance, while suited security stood perfectly still near the doors. Lucien glanced toward me calmly. Temporarily. Temporarily? I own several properties. Of course he did. The car stopped beneath the entrance awning while rain hammered loudly above us. Before I could even reach for the door, another suited man opened it from outside, holding a black umbrella overhead. Warm light spilled across polished marble floors inside the house. Everything smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive coffee. I stepped carefully onto the marble entrance while trying not to stare too obviously at the enormous staircase curving upward beneath crystal chandeliers. This was not wealth. This was another planet. My entire apartment could probably fit inside the front hallway. A woman appeared from deeper inside the house almost immediately. Mid-50s maybe. Elegant silver-streaked hair pulled neatly back. Sharp black dress. Kind eyes. You are soaked, she said before I could even speak. Her accent carried traces of Italy softened by years in America. Lucien, the poor girl is freezing. Lucien removed his coat calmly. Celeste Rowan, he said. This is Marta. Marta touched my arm gently. Come, she said warmly. Before pneumonia joins tonight's entertainment. I blinked in surprise. Marta smiled slightly. Trust me, child. If Mr. Valeni brings someone home during a thunderstorm, it is already a historic event. Lucien looked mildly irritated. Marta ignored him completely. Somehow that amused me instantly. She guided me through the enormous house, while staff moved quietly in the background like ghosts dressed in black. Everything looked impossibly expensive without feeling cold. Dark wood. Soft lighting. Bookshelves taller than my apartment ceiling. Rain crashing softly against giant windows overlooking the river. Your room is upstairs, Marta explained gently. Fresh clothes are waiting inside. I stopped walking immediately. Wait. What? Marta blinked. Clothes. How would you know my size? Her expression shifted slightly before she answered too quickly. Women notice these things. My eyes narrowed immediately. Lucien bought clothes for me already? Marta smiled with suspicious innocence. The man notices more than he admits. Somewhere behind us, Lucien loosened his tie while speaking quietly into his phone near the staircase. Even exhausted, he looked intimidating standing beneath chandelier light with rain-dark hair and that perfectly controlled expression. I do not need expensive gifts, I said firmly. Marta's eyes softened unexpectedly. No, sweetheart, she replied quietly. But maybe tonight you needed somewhere nobody could reach you. The words hit harder than they should have. She opened the bedroom door gently before stepping aside. I froze instantly. The room looked larger than my entire apartment. Soft gray blankets covered an enormous bed beside windows overlooking rain-soaked Manhattan lights across the river. A violin rested carefully on a stand near the fireplace. My breath caught completely. What is that doing here? Marta looked confused. The violin? Yes. It belongs to Mr. Valeni. Every thought in my head stopped at once. Slowly, I stepped closer toward the instrument. Antique wood. Perfect condition. Beautiful enough to belong inside museums. Then I noticed the silver initials engraved near the chin rest. ER. My pulse stumbled violently. Those were my mother's initials. And behind me, Lucien's voice appeared softly from the doorway. I wondered how long it would take you to recognize it. For a second, I genuinely forgot how to breathe. The violin resting beside the fireplace looked exactly like the one my mother used to describe before she died. Same dark amber wood. Same silver initials engraved near the chin rest. ER. Evelyn Rowan. My fingers trembled slightly as I stepped closer toward it. Where did you get this? My voice barely sounded like mine anymore. Behind me, Lucien closed the bedroom door softly. It belonged to your mother. Every nerve in my body tightened instantly. I turned toward him too fast. How do you know my mother? Lucien loosened the cuffs of his black shirt calmly, but I noticed something strange for the first time since meeting him. He looked uneasy. Not nervous exactly. Just careful. Like one wrong sentence mattered more than usual. Sit down, Celeste. No, my voice came sharper than intended. You do not get to bring me into this house. pull out my mother's violin, and suddenly act mysterious. Lucien watched me silently for several seconds while rain crashed against the massive windows behind him. "Your mother worked for my family," he said finally. The words hit me hard enough to make me blink. "What? 23 years ago?" I stared at him in disbelief. "My mother played piano in hotel lounges, Lucien. She worked 3 jobs, and one of those jobs was for my father." I shook my head immediately. "No, she never mentioned your family. That was probably intentional." Anger flared through my confusion. "Stop talking like everything has a hidden meaning." Lucien's jaw tightened slightly. "In my world, it usually does." Silence filled the room heavily after that. I looked back toward the violin while memories crashed through my chest unexpectedly. My mother practicing scales late at night in our tiny Queens apartment, her fingers dancing across invisible piano keys on kitchen counters. The way her eyes always softened when she talked about music like it was something sacred. "She sold her violin when I was 11, I whispered quietly. "We needed rent money." Lucien stepped closer slowly. Not threatening. "Careful." "No," he said softly. "She did not." I looked up at him instantly. "What?" "Your mother left it with my father for safekeeping." Nothing in the room felt stable anymore. "Why would she do that?" Lucien's gaze shifted briefly toward the rain-covered windows before returning to me. "Because she believed someone was trying to take it from her." A cold shiver moved through my chest. That does not make sense. It did to her. My thoughts raced violently, trying to connect impossible pieces together. My mother died from heart failure when I was 14. Quiet. Sudden. Ordinary. At least that was what doctors told me. "You knew her personally?" I asked carefully. Lucien nodded once. "I was 13 when we met." The answer stunned me completely. "You were just a kid." "So were you." Something in his voice changed slightly when he said it. Softer somehow. Almost distant. I looked at him more carefully then. Really looked at him. The controlled posture. The expensive clothes. The exhaustion hidden behind those dark eyes. This man carried history around him like shadows. "Did my mother know your father was dangerous?" I asked quietly. Lucien almost smiled. Sad this time. Everybody knew my father was dangerous. Thunder echoed across the river outside while the fire near the violin crackled softly. The room suddenly felt too warm compared to the storm in my chest. "Why did nobody ever tell me any of this?" I whispered. Lucien looked directly at me. "Because your mother wanted you far away from people like my family." That answer hurt more than I expected. Because deep down, I already understood what he meant. Men like Lucien did not belong in ordinary lives. They entered them like storms. Beautiful, powerful, destructive. "Then why bring me here?" I asked quietly. His expression darkened slightly. "Because tonight somebody searched your locker looking for something connected to your mother." Every thought in my head stopped again. "What?" Lucien walked toward the fireplace, slowly before resting one hand against the piano beside it. "The questions about you started 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. Around the same time someone began asking about Evelyn Rowan's missing violin. I looked back toward the instrument beside the fire. My mother's violin. Not sold. Hidden. Protected for 23 years inside the home of one of the most dangerous men in New York. None of this felt real anymore. "Lucien," I whispered carefully, "what exactly did my mother get involved with?" He stayed silent for several seconds too long. Then finally he looked at me with an expression that made my stomach drop completely. "That," he said quietly, "is what I have been trying to figure out before someone reaches you first." Sleep became impossible after that conversation. Long after Lucien left the bedroom, I stayed standing beside the fireplace, staring at my mother's violin while rain battered the windows overlooking Manhattan. Nothing about my life made sense anymore. My mother had spent years hiding overdue bills inside kitchen drawers and stretching grocery money through impossible weeks. Yet somehow she had connections to one of the most powerful families in New York. I touched the violin carefully with trembling fingers. The wood felt smooth beneath my hand. Familiar. Like touching a memory instead of an object. My mother used to hum while cooking late at night. Bach, Chopin, Debussy. Music followed her through every room, even after life became hard. Beautiful things survive longer than people do, she once told me while fixing a broken violin string at our kitchen table. At the time, I thought she was talking about music. Now I was not sure anymore. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts around 3 in the morning. Marta stepped inside carrying tea on a silver tray. Chamomile. Honey. Steam curled softly into the warm room. "You look exactly like Evelyn when you are worried," she said gently. I looked up instantly. "You knew my mother too?" Marta nodded while setting the tray beside the fireplace. "She played piano downstairs many years ago. Why did nobody ever tell me?" Marta's expression softened sadly. "Because your mother spent her whole life trying to protect you from this world." The same answer again. Different voice. Same weight behind it. I sat slowly near the fire with the tea warming my hands while thunder echoed outside. "Was she afraid?" I asked quietly. Marta hesitated before answering. "Your mother was many things. Brave, stubborn, too kind for certain people." Something tightened painfully in my chest. "That sounds like a yes." Marta sat across from me silently for a moment. "Evelyn trusted the wrong man once," she admitted softly. "After that, she stopped trusting almost everyone." My thoughts immediately drifted toward Lucien downstairs somewhere inside this enormous house. Cold eyes. Careful words. Exhaustion hidden beneath expensive suits. Did she trust Lucien? Marta smiled faintly into her tea. Lucien was different then. People like him are never different. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Marta's gaze lifted toward me slowly. "You think he is cruel. I think men with bodyguards and fake license plate problems are dangerous. That is fair." I almost smiled despite myself. Marta leaned back carefully before continuing. "But dangerous men are not always dangerous to the people they choose to protect." Something about the sentence unsettled me more than it should have. Because deep down, I already felt it too. The strange way Lucien watched me. Not possessive, not controlling. Protective in a way that almost looked personal. That scared me more than his money ever could. Around 4 a.m, exhaustion finally dragged me towards sleep. I changed into the clothes left beside the bed and curled beneath impossibly soft blankets while rain whispered against the windows. The last thing I remember was staring at the violin beside the fireplace, wondering how many secrets my mother buried before she died. I woke suddenly 3 hours later to raised voices downstairs. Male voices. Sharp. Urgent. My heart started racing immediately. Sunlight barely touched the gray skyline outside, while thunder clouds still hovered over the river. Another argument echoed faintly from below. I slipped out of bed carefully and moved toward the hallway before realizing I was still wearing borrowed clothes inside a stranger's mansion at 7 a.m. Normal people should have left already. But nothing about Lucien Valeni felt normal anymore. The voices grew louder near the staircase. One belonged to Lucien. Calm but colder than before. "You should have informed me immediately. We only confirmed it 30 minutes ago," another man answered nervously. I moved closer quietly before common sense could stop me. "The storage unit was opened overnight," the man continued. "Whoever searched it knew exactly where to look." Silence followed. Heavy silence. Then Lucien spoke again. "And the photographs." My breath caught instantly. "Photographs? Gone," the man admitted. "But there was one thing left behind." Footsteps approached the staircase suddenly. I stepped back too late. Lucien appeared below me, wearing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled slightly past his wrists. His expression darkened immediately when he saw me standing there barefoot. "You should still be asleep," he said quietly. "You should stop talking about me like I am not upstairs listening." The other men, near the dining room table, went silent instantly. Lucien watched me carefully for several seconds before finally speaking. "Come downstairs, Celeste." Something in his voice made my pulse stumble unexpectedly. Calm, controlled. But underneath it, for the first time since meeting him, I heard genuine worry. Every conversation stopped the second I walked into the dining room. 3 men in dark suits immediately stood straighter around the long marble table, while Lucien watched me approach with unreadable eyes. Morning light filtered weakly through enormous windows overlooking the river, turning the entire room silver and gray. Coffee steamed untouched beside scattered documents and open folders. Nobody looked relaxed. "You were talking about photographs?" I said quietly. Lucien dismissed the other men with a small glance before answering. "Sit down first. I am tired of people telling me what to do inside this house." One of the men near the table looked horrified by my tone. Lucien only pulled out a chair calmly. "Then sit because you choose to." I hated that answer slightly less. I sat slowly while trying not to notice how every person in the room watched Lucien before moving or speaking. Power changed the air around people. It made everyone else careful. Lucien remained standing beside the window for several seconds before finally speaking. 24 years ago, your mother stored several personal items in a private unit owned by my family. My pulse quickened instantly. What kind of items? Music recordings, letters, financial records. I frowned slightly. Financial records for what? Lucien's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Payments. The word landed strangely between us. Payments from who? My father. Silence followed immediately. Heavy silence. My thoughts raced through impossible explanations while rain clouds drifted slowly above the river outside. You are saying my mother worked for your father, I whispered carefully. And he paid her enough money to hide financial records? Lucien looked directly at me. I am saying your mother became involved in something she later regretted. My chest tightened painfully. Was she in danger? Yes. The honesty in his answer hit harder than lies would have. I looked down at my hands resting against the table. Why did nobody ever tell me any of this? Lucien moved closer slowly before sliding a photograph across the marble surface toward me. Because your mother erased herself carefully after she left Manhattan. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked up the photograph. The image looked old, faded around the corners. My breath caught instantly. My mother stood beside a black piano wearing a silver dress I had never seen before. Younger, smiling, beautiful in a way grief never allowed later. And beside her stood a teenage boy with dark eyes and sharp cheekbones I recognized immediately. Lucien, maybe 13 or 14 years old. My stomach dropped completely. You knew her that well? Lucien's expression softened with something almost painful. Your mother taught me piano when I was younger. I stared at him in disbelief. What? My father believed music made powerful men appear civilized. That bitter edge returned briefly beneath his calm voice. Your mother disagreed. I looked back at the photograph again. Young Lucien stood too close beside her. Comfortable. Safe. Like someone who trusted her completely. She cared about you. I whispered before realizing it aloud. Something flickered across Lucien's face too quickly to fully understand. Yes, he answered quietly. She did. Silence wrapped around us again, while thunder rolled faintly over the city. One thought suddenly pushed violently through my chest. Did my mother know your father was dangerous before she worked for him? Lucien looked toward the windows instead of me. Everybody knew. Then why stay? His answer came almost immediately this time. Because sometimes people accept dangerous jobs when they are desperate enough. I flinched slightly at the truth inside those words. My mother spent years exhausted, overworked, carrying fear in quiet ways I never understood as a child. What happened to your father? I asked softly. Lucien's eyes darkened instantly. He died 12 years ago. Something about the way he said it stopped me from asking more. Grief sat differently on people who grew up around power. Quieter, colder, more dangerous somehow. One of the security men entered the dining room suddenly before leaning close toward Lucien. Sir, we identified the man from the Blue Canary. Lucien's entire posture changed instantly. Subtle but unmistakable. Predator stillness. Who is he? Private collector connected to the Marconi family. Every color drained from Lucien's face for half a second before control returned immediately. That is impossible, he said quietly. The guard hesitated. Apparently not. My stomach tightened painfully again. Who are the Marconis? Nobody answered immediately, which terrified me more than words would have. Lucien finally looked toward me with an expression colder than anything I had seen from him yet. The family responsible for destroying your mother's life. The room suddenly felt too small to breathe inside. What does that mean? I whispered. Lucien stepped closer slowly while thunder shook the windows behind him. It means, he said quietly, whatever your mother hid 23 years ago was important enough for someone to start searching for you now. The rest of the morning passed like a dream I could not wake up from. Rain continued falling beyond the enormous windows while men in expensive suits moved quietly through Lucien's house carrying folders, phones, and secrets I did not understand. Every answer only created more questions. My mother, the violin, the Marconi family. None of it belonged anywhere near my ordinary life in Queens. Yet somehow all of it had been waiting for me long before last night. Lucien stood near the fireplace reading documents while sunlight struggled through the storm clouds behind him. Calm, focused, untouchable. Watching him felt dangerous in ways I could not explain logically. You still think I should stay here? I asked quietly from the couch. He did not look up immediately. Yes. Even after all this. Especially after all this. His certainty unsettled me. You say things like you already know how this ends. Lucien finally lifted his eyes toward me. No, he said softly. I say things like someone who has watched too many people underestimate danger. The room fell silent again after that. Somewhere deeper inside the house, a clock chimed softly. 11 in the morning. My manager at the Blue Canary had probably already left 6 angry messages by now. I should go to work tonight, I said suddenly. Lucien's expression hardened instantly. No, Lucien. Absolutely not. Irritation flared through me immediately. I cannot hide inside this mansion forever. Nobody said forever. Then stop acting like I belong here. The words landed harder than I intended. Something cold flickered behind Lucien's eyes before disappearing again. You do not belong here, he answered quietly. That is exactly why I am trying to keep you alive long enough to leave it. Guilt twisted painfully through my chest. Because underneath the sharpness in his voice, I heard exhaustion again. Real exhaustion. The kind carried by people protecting too many things alone. Marta entered before either of us could speak again. Your phone, she said gently while handing it toward me. It would not stop ringing. I stared at the screen instantly. 12 missed calls. 7 texts. All from my manager. My stomach tightened. I need to answer this. Lucien watched silently while I stepped toward the hallway for privacy. The second I answered, my manager's voice exploded through the phone. Where the hell are you? I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear. I am sorry. Something happened last night. Yeah, apparently. His tone sounded strange. Nervous almost. Listen, do not come in tonight. My pulse slowed slightly. You are firing me? No. I mean, yes. Maybe temporarily. Confusion hit instantly. What are you talking about? Silence crackled briefly through the line before he lowered his voice. Some people came asking about you this morning. Every muscle in my body locked. What people? Rich people. Dangerous-looking people. My eyes lifted automatically toward Lucien across the room. He was already watching me carefully. What did they want? I whispered. Your locker. Your schedule. Your address. Fear spread slowly through my chest again. Did you tell them anything? No, he answered quickly. Because your boyfriend showed up first. My thoughts stopped completely. My what? Tall guy? Expensive suit. Scared the life out of everybody. Heat rushed instantly into my face. I turned toward Lucien in disbelief while he remained perfectly calm beside the fireplace. He said if anyone asked questions about you again, the Blue Canary would close permanently. My mouth fell open slightly. Lucien did not even look guilty. You threatened my boss? I demanded after ending the call. No, he sounded almost offended. I encouraged caution. Lucien, your manager now understands the importance of protecting employee privacy. I stared at him in complete disbelief while Marta quietly hid a smile nearby. You cannot control people like that. Lucien stepped closer slowly until only a few feet separated us. Celeste, he said softly, men searched your apartment, your locker, and your mother's storage unit within 24 hours. His eyes held mine steadily. Calm, dark, protective in the most terrifying way imaginable. Forgive me if I stop pretending this is coincidence. My pulse stumbled slightly beneath the weight of his gaze. Before I could answer, one of the security men rushed suddenly into the room looking pale. Sir, he said tightly, we found another photograph. Lucien's entire expression sharpened instantly. Where? The guard swallowed once before answering. Inside Miss Rowan's apartment. The room went completely silent after that. Lucien grabbed his coat immediately while the security men exchanged tense looks around the dining room. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What photograph? I asked quickly. The guard hesitated before answering. One of our men searched the apartment after the suspicious vehicle left the area. Lucien's eyes darkened instantly. And the apartment had already been entered. Cold spread through my chest. Someone broke into my home? The guard nodded once. Nothing appeared stolen, but there was an envelope left on the kitchen table. Lucien held out his hand immediately. Show me. The photograph slid across the marble table toward him. I stepped closer automatically while he studied it in silence. Then his jaw tightened sharply. What is it? I whispered. Lucien looked at the image for another second before finally handing it to me carefully. My breath caught instantly. The photograph showed my mother standing outside a hotel entrance in Manhattan almost 25 years ago. Younger again. Beautiful again. But this time she was not alone. A man stood beside her with one hand resting lightly against her back. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit, familiar eyes. I looked up at Lucien slowly. That is your father. Lucien gave a small nod. Something painful flickered briefly behind his expression before disappearing again. On the back of the photograph, written in black ink, were 6 words. She never told you the truth. My stomach dropped instantly. Who left this? Lucien's voice turned dangerously calm. That is what we are about to find out. He reached for his phone immediately while the room around us shifted into motion again. Security moved quickly toward exits. Phones rang quietly. Orders passed between men in low voices. Watching it happen felt surreal. Like standing inside the center of a storm while everyone else already understood the danger better than you did. I want to go home, I whispered suddenly. Lucien looked up sharply. No, Lucien, this is my life. Exactly. His voice cut through the room harder than expected. And someone is trying very hard to drag you into something ugly. Frustration burned through my fear. You still are not telling me everything. Because I do not know everything yet. But you know enough to scare everyone in this house. Silence hit instantly after that. Lucien stared at me across the table while rain tapped softly against the windows behind him. Tiredness sat heavily beneath his eyes now. Real tiredness. The kind people carried after too many years surviving difficult things alone. My father had enemies, he said quietly. Many of them. I folded my arms tightly across myself. And my mother got caught in the middle. No, his answer came immediately. Your mother stepped into the middle willingly. That hurt more than I expected. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew my mother had hidden parts of herself from me. Why? I asked softly. Lucien looked toward the photograph in my hands. I think she was protecting someone. Before I could ask who, another phone rang sharply across the room. One of the guards answered quickly before his entire expression changed. Sir, he said carefully, there is another issue. Lucien closed his eyes briefly like a man already exhausted by bad news. What now? Someone entered the Blue Canary 30 minutes ago, asking specifically for Miss Rowan. My pulse stumbled hard. Who? The guard hesitated. A woman. Every person in the room went still again. Even Lucien looked surprised this time. Describe her, he ordered quietly. Mid-50s. Blonde hair. Expensive jewelry. The guard swallowed once before continuing. She claimed to know Evelyn Rowan personally. My fingers tightened around the photograph instantly. My mother never mentioned anyone like that. Lucien stared toward the rain-covered windows with an expression colder than before. No, he said softly. But I know exactly who she is. Fear twisted sharply through my chest. Who? Lucien looked directly at me this time. Calm. Dangerous. Certain. The woman who destroyed my family. Thunder cracked loudly above the river outside while the lights flickered once across the entire mansion. And for the first time since entering Lucien's world, I realized something terrifying. Maybe the danger surrounding me had never actually been about the violin. The mansion felt colder after that. Maybe it was the storm outside. Maybe it was the expression on Lucien's face when he mentioned the woman from the Blue Canary. Either way, the air inside the house had changed completely. Tell me who she is, I said quietly. Lucien loosened his tie slowly before answering. Vivian Marconi. The name settled heavily into the room. Even the guards looked uncomfortable hearing it aloud. And she knew my mother? Lucien gave a slow nod. Too well. Rain lashed violently against the windows overlooking the river while thunder rolled across Manhattan again. Somewhere deep inside the house, a grandfather clock echoed softly through the silence. Start explaining, I said firmly. Lucien studied me carefully for several seconds before motioning toward the fireplace. Sit down. I am serious. So am I. Something in his voice stopped me from arguing further. I sat slowly near the fire while Lucien remained standing across from me with one hand resting against the piano. Shadows from the flames moved across his face, making him look older somehow. More tired. 24 years ago, he began quietly, my father entered a business agreement with the Marconi family. The legal business? Lucien's eyes lifted toward me calmly. Nothing involving my father was entirely legal. I swallowed hard, but nodded for him to continue. Vivian Marconi was married at the time, he said. Beautiful. Intelligent. Extremely dangerous. Something tightened painfully in my chest already. My father trusted her. And Lucien looked toward the fire instead of me. And eventually he trusted her more than his own family. Silence stretched heavily between us. I already understood where this was going. An affair, I whispered. Lucien gave a faint nod. Yes. The room suddenly felt smaller. Hotter. Sadder somehow. Where does my mother fit into this? Lucien's jaw tightened slightly. Your mother worked inside one of my father's hotels during that period. And she found out something. Yes. His answer came immediately this time. Something important enough to destroy people. My pulse quickened. What kind of something? Lucien finally looked directly at me again. Financial records. Offshore accounts. Payments tied to powerful people. Fear slid slowly through my chest. My mother had evidence. My mother believed so. That caught me off guard instantly. Your mother knew Evelyn too? Lucien's expression darkened painfully. My mother trusted Evelyn more than anyone else in that house. I stared at him quietly while another impossible piece fell into place. So when everything collapsed, everybody blamed everybody else. Lucien finished softly. Families destroyed each other trying to survive. The exhaustion in his voice felt deeper now. Older than grief. What happened to your mother? I asked carefully. Lucien stayed silent too long before answering. She died when I was 16. Something inside my chest cracked slightly hearing that. Because suddenly I understood the loneliness behind his eyes. Lucien, do not. His voice stayed calm, but fragile around the edges somehow. Do not look at me like that. Like what? He exhaled slowly before answering. Like you suddenly understand me. The honesty in those words hurt unexpectedly. Firelight flickered softly across the room, while rain hammered the windows harder outside. Maybe I do. I whispered before thinking better of it. Lucien stared at me for several quiet seconds. The air between us shifted strangely again. Softer now. Dangerous in a completely different way. Then his phone rang sharply through the silence. The moment shattered instantly. Lucien answered immediately, while his expression darkened with every passing second. When? He asked coldly. My stomach tightened again. No police, he continued. Lock the building down. He ended the call slowly before looking toward me with an expression that made my pulse stumble. What happened? I asked quietly. Lucien stepped closer until only a few feet separated us beside the fire. Someone entered your apartment again. Fear hit instantly. What did they take? His eyes held mine steadily. Nothing. Then why break in? Lucien's jaw tightened sharply before he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver object wrapped carefully in cloth. My breath caught immediately. It was my mother's old piano key necklace, the one she supposedly lost years ago. They left this on your bed, Lucien said softly. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. Then I noticed the folded note tied beneath the chain. For words written in black ink. Ask Lucien about Vienna. The color drained from Lucien's face the second he read the note. Not fear. Something worse. Recognition. My fingers tightened around my mother's necklace while rain hammered the mansion windows hard enough to sound like static. What is Vienna? I asked quietly. Lucien stayed silent. Too silent. Every instinct in my body screamed that whatever happened there mattered more than everything else combined. Lucien. He finally looked at me slowly. Exhaustion sat heavily beneath his eyes now. Raw and unguarded for the first time since we met. Vienna was the last place I saw your mother alive. The room tilted slightly around me. What? Lucien walked toward the fireplace before resting one hand against the piano like he suddenly needed support. 20 years ago, my father sent me to Austria for school. His voice sounded distant now, like he was speaking through memory instead of the room around us. Your mother came with us for 3 months. My chest tightened painfully. Why? Because she was helping my mother leave. Silence crashed through me instantly. Leave your father? Lucien nodded once. My father controlled everything around him. Money, people, fear. His jaw tightened sharply. But your mother believed my mother deserved freedom. The fire crackled softly between us while thunder rolled beyond the river outside. What happened in Vienna? I whispered. Lucien closed his eyes briefly before answering. Someone betrayed them. Every hair on my arms rose instantly. Who? We never proved it. His voice turned colder again. Controlled. Dangerous. But after Vienna, my mother returned to New York terrified. And your mother disappeared from our lives completely. I stared at him in disbelief while impossible pieces connected violently inside my head. The photographs, I whispered. The records. My mother was collecting evidence against your father. Lucien looked toward me slowly. Yes. And now someone thinks I know where it is. Exactly. Fear settled heavily into my chest. Not sharp anymore. Heavy. Real. But I do not know anything. Lucien stepped closer carefully. Neither did your mother at first. The words landed harder than he intended. I could hear it immediately in his voice. Regret. I looked down at the necklace trembling slightly in my hands. Why keep this from me? Because I wanted you untouched by all of it. That was never your choice. No, he admitted softly. But I tried anyway. Rain streaked across the giant windows behind him while silence wrapped tightly around the room again. Somewhere downstairs, security moved quickly through the mansion like shadows. Lucien's world never really rested. It only paused between threats. The woman from the Blue Canary, I said carefully. Vivian. Lucien's expression darkened instantly. She was involved in Vienna too. How? He hesitated this time. Actual hesitation. She was the one my father chose instead of his family. Something painful twisted through my chest hearing that. Not jealousy. Grief maybe. For a boy who lost his mother because powerful adults destroyed each other carelessly. And now? I asked quietly. Lucien looked directly at me. Now she believes your mother hid something before disappearing. Did she? His eyes stayed locked on mine for several long seconds. I think your mother hid the truth about who betrayed everyone. Thunder cracked loudly above the river again. I wrapped my fingers tighter around the necklace instinctively, while memories surfaced suddenly from nowhere. My mother sitting beside the window during storms, crying quietly when she thought I was asleep, playing the same piano melody over and over without finishing it. Lucien, I whispered slowly. My mother used to talk in her sleep sometimes. His attention sharpened instantly. About what? I swallowed hard. A train station. Silence hit the room immediately. Dangerous silence. What station? I searched my memory desperately through years of forgotten childhood details. I do not know. Then suddenly I did. My pulse stumbled violently. Wait. Lucien stepped closer instantly. Celeste. I looked up at him while thunder shook the windows behind us. She kept saying one name over and over. What name? My throat tightened painfully around the answer. Westbahnhof. Lucien went completely still. Every trace of color vanished from his face. That is impossible, he whispered. Before I could ask why, every light inside the mansion suddenly shut off at once. Darkness swallowed the room instantly, while alarms exploded through the house.